I remember in, I think it was the latter part of our high school years, you had a cassette sampler that had one side of the tape was Relient K samples from their first album, and the other side was John Rubin samples from his first album that Goatee Records had put out through like Christian bookstores or something. Do you remember that?
Oh man, I had forgotten about the. Was
Yeah,
that me?
that was you. You had that,
Oh, I
and
wonder
you
if I
played
still
for
have
me.
that.
I wish you, if you do, let me know because I want it. Just give it to me.
Oh yeah,
Um,
if I find it, I'll give it to you because that's like you're the cassette person. See,
yeah,
I think this needs to be talked about is Adam is obsessed with cassettes.
not only cassettes, but also CDs, vinyl, vinyl, not vinyls, because the plural of vinyl is vinyl. 8 tracks, even. I have a pretty good 8 track collection.
The
Um,
plural of 8 track
but
is
yeah.
8 trick.
Yeah, but yeah, I still like to have cassettes, and I just bought um, Eminem's new album on vinyl, CD, and cassette because I'm a psychopath like that. So
I I have to look it up, but I think I still have. I went to a CD store back years ago, late '90s, and they were giving out sample cassettes. And I remember this one, and it was 2 songs from this band that no one ever heard of before that was just starting out. It was a band called Linkin Park, if you've ever heard of them.
I I think I've heard of them. Yes.
And it had the song, I forgot what one of the songs was. The other one was like their first single.
Oh shoot. Oh man. Off
I'm
Hybrid
looking.
Theory. Um,
Yeah, I can't remember what
I
the two.
don't remember what their
I've
first
seen that
single
one
was.
recently. I've seen that cassette tape recently, like in the past few years, that I still have. But I not seen the other cassette. Oh, One Step Closer.
One Step Closer. Yes.
There is
Okay.
a C in there. Look up the Wikipedia of that album and just look up the track listing, and it's like a mile long of Hybrid Theory. But
Yeah,
I
because they
do
keep
have that
re-releasing it.
and that's just kind of how things. That's how back in the day for all you young kids. Back in the day, you didn't get sample CDs because that cost too much. They gave you sample cassettes of just a few songs, and
Snippets.
sometimes
Not
it
even
was.
full songs.
Well, I got 2 full songs on the Hybrid Theory one.
Oh
The problem
wow.
is,
Okay.
it was on one side. It was on side A, and side B had nothing on it.
Really?
Yeah. So you think it'd be side A would have one song and side B would have the other song, so you just keep flipping it.
Yeah.
But no, that would make too much sense. And unlike vinyl, you have to rewind this stuff. So you'd listen to both songs, which is like 6 minutes, rewind
Right.
it, listen to it again, rewind it, listen to it again. Doing that over and over again will destroy a cassette because there's only 2 songs.
It takes a lot to destroy people. There's a lot of misconceptions about tapes. One of them is that a tape deck will like eat the tape after so many plays, or like if you don't, maintain the cassette deck properly, or you don't maintain the cassettes properly, or something. But really, I mean, so what I do with my tapes is once a year, if you don't listen to it, which I mean, honestly, not everyone listens to every single tape they have every single year or whatever, but just take it, pop it in your deck, fast forward it all the way through, then rewind it all the way through. That gets it loosened up enough to where it maintains it. And then just put it in this protective case and then just stick it back on the shelf and keep it out of the dust and you should be fine. And then just take care of your cassette deck. Make sure that you clean off the tape head and um, sometimes there would be belts inside the cassette deck that'll get worn out over time. So if you need to replace those belts, if you hear squeaking or whatever, you need to replace the belts. But other than that, you just maintain your deck and you'll be fine, and the cassettes will play just fine. And I'm nerding out a little bit about this because it's cool. It's a lot better than going on Spotify and just finding an album that you like and just hitting play, and then there's no real physical satisfaction in that. It's just
I think I've only had a few cassettes in my life. That one that I talked about, the one Adam talked about, and Jerry Seinfeld, I'm telling you for the last time.
Really?
I don't know why.
So another
But
cool thing about cassettes, real quick, is if you go on Bandcamp, bandcamp.com, and you find a band that you like, odds are that band has released material exclusively on cassette because that's the cheapest format. So a lot of indie bands will release things exclusively on cassette. And they'll release digital copies, obviously, on Spotify and YouTube or whatever, or Bandcamp. But if you want a physical copy of something, most of the time, or a lot of the time, the only way you can really get it is through cassette, which I think is awesome. So I
how
buy
is,
a lot of indie bands on cassette.
how is cassette cheaper than CD?
They just reuse old stock. It's a thing. Look it up. Go on Bandcamp. I'm telling you. But yeah, let's get back to Relient K because
Yeah.
this is
So
an
that may
extremely.
have to get cut out.
No.
Uh,
It's that's a good. It's fine.
okay. So okay, go back to you. You said you introduced. So the thing was that I introduced you to Reliant K.
Yeah. So you had that tape that had a snippet of um, the Marilyn Manson "Ate My Girlfriend" song, which is the one that really caught my attention for Relient K. And honestly, after that, and after hearing their first album, I kind of tuned them out a little bit, and I kind of skipped over Anatomy, and then I went, and once Two Lefts came out, then I really got into Relient K. They became one of my favorite bands. So my favorite, I think, like at this point, it's Angels and Airwaves, Blink 182, Relient K, and then the list goes on from there. But they're up there in the top five for sure.
So for me, I knew about Reliant K from the song Marilyn Manson. It's not called Marilyn Manson, it's called My Girlfriend, but nobody ever knows it by that name.
Mm-hmm.
It's either called, people know it by Marilyn Manson or Marilyn Manson Ain't My Girlfriend. It is the weirdest music video of all time. Maybe.
I don't think I've ever seen the music video though.
Oh,
I should
go
look that
look
up.
it up. Go look it up. You'll love it. It is, if I remember correctly, a giant Marilyn Manson-esque character that's roaming around the streets. It's 2000. It's literally came out in, I think, the year 2000.
Right.
But I knew about the band from there. I didn't. My first CD that I bought of theirs was Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek. Nope. Is it
Yep.
Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek? Yeah, that was the first one I bought.
Yeah.
And I remember going to Tower Records in Opry Mills Mall.
Mm-hmm.
Tower Records, people.
Throwback. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would look up their CDs and like just read the back of them, and their song titles were just the best ever. Like I have to go through like from their first two albums because I didn't buy Anatomy until after it had come out. So like from Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek, you had great song names such as May the Horse Be With You, Breakfast at Tiffany's, which is not actually a song. It's a title of a track. Maybe It's Maybelline. And then they had their first album, Hello McFly. Charles in Charge, which is literally actually the theme song to Charles in Charge. I did not realize that. I was not old enough to know what Charles in Charge was.
Mm-hmm.
Also, on one of their albums, they talk about I'm Lion-O. Which one is that? Is that Anatomy? Yes. So they have a song called I'm Lion-O that's about Thundercats, I believe. I had no clue what Thundercats was. Everybody's like, I love this song because it's about this thing, and I'm like going to look it up well, I guess Google was technically around at the time, but nobody was using Google yet, I don't think. And I was like, what is Thundercats? Trying to look it up online.
So I love the quirkiness of like their first several albums and their sense of humor and their sort of sarcasm, like interlaced with their sort of religious undertones that they tried to weave in. Yeah, it was a cool thing because as like us as like Christian kids, it was like the coolest band to listen to because they were so off the beaten path of what a Christian band was supposed to be. they were Blink-182-esque in sound, which was like completely up my alley, and they were like unique in a way that no other band was at the time.
I never really listened to MXPX, so I was about to compare them to MXPX,
I
but
did
I didn't.
listen to MXPX, but even MXPX wasn't as quirky in their
Yeah,
lyricism as Matt Thiessen and Matt
no.
Hoops.
And like the one I was thinking of before them was like the OC Supertones.
The OC Supertones, yeah, or just the Supertones. But none of them had the same sort of appeal that Relient K had, I don't think. What?
Just got a text message from a friend who said, "Tell Adam the new logo is real good."
I worked hard on it.
I just muted my phone so that doesn't show up again.
So let's do the
Okay.
let's talk about the albums like sort of chronologically and like
Yeah, so
kind of what we think about them.
so we're going to go through them, and we're also going to actually list out the full names of each of these albums. We've been saying like Two Lefts, Anatomy. Those are the short names, and the names of the albums are also really good, except for their first album, which is just self-titled. It's not called self-titled; it's called Relient K. So,
Right. But their
what we
first
wanted
album
to,
wasn't their first release. It was 2000 AD.
which also wasn't their first release.
Okay, but their first EP was 2000 AD.
No, it wasn't. It was All Work and No Play, which was from 1998.
Touche. It was all work and no play, but that was a demo. I don't
Yeah,
count
it's a
that.
demo that you can't find, but it still existed.
Yes. Okay. So
As you can tell, we both know our Reliant K history way too much. While other
yeah.
people were
So
studying when they went to school, we were keeping up with Reliant K history. This is a Reliant K cassette podcast now.
this is
Sorry.
basically a Relient K love story, is what this is.
Yes.
In podcast form, when we should be doing a podcast about conspiracy theories, but we decided to just change it up because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I wanted to do this, because Relient K put out a few months ago a solicitation for votes on basically a greatest hits album, which is
Yeah.
a fan curated greatest hits album called All Work and No Playlist, that all these fans went through and voted on, and they pulled out something like 14 or 15 tracks, and they're gonna press that onto vinyl. So they just pressed it on the vinyl, and I'm waiting on it to get here. But so in sort of recognition slash celebration of that, I guess that signifies to me that the band's career is effectively over. So I thought it'd be a good chance to sort of look back, because I've spent a majority of my adult life listening to these people and just really enjoying their music and having that music sort of help me through some times. And so yeah, it's just in an appreciation of that I wanted to talk about them for a little bit.
So we're going to start with the first album. We're not going to do the EPs, but we are going to add one EP later, and I'll let Adam say why we're adding that EP, and we're also going to cut out one album later, and I'll let Adam say why we're cutting out that album. So just know this is our version of the full-length albums. So there is some discrepancy on how we define this, and we'll get into why we are replacing one with another.
Right.
Ooh, some lore. So the first album is called Relient K. It came out in 2000. We kind of want to go through like what we liked, what we didn't like, and favorite song, I think is what we're doing on each of these.
So all right, so with the first album, what I liked about it was very quirky and unique for the time, but it was familiar enough to me as somebody who'd been listening to Blink-182 and MXPX and Goldfinger and all these other pop punk bands from the secular realm to hear a Christian band come out with music that is, well, okay, MXPX was kind of a Christian band too, but that's a debate for a different time, which I probably won't have with you because you're not really a big fan of MXPX. But
I know very little about them. I know they exist.
I love MXPX. Obviously, that's why I'm talking about Relient K. But anyway, so yeah, this album had a lot of appeal to me in that sense, and also the fact that you were into them sort of encouraged me even more to get into them, because it was like, music is better when it's shared with friends. So yeah. It's my favorite track on that album is the popular track is going to be My Girlfriend, but my favorite track is Softer to Me because it was the most somber moment on the album, and I think when they did the acoustic version, that's the version of that song I like better. But that's my favorite song on the album.
Also, just a side note, we are not playing any snippets of any of these songs for very obvious reasons.
Yeah, we don't
Like,
want to get copyright struck.
yeah, I don't know who owns any of these songs because they've been on a few different labels, I think. And so who knows who owns what songs. So not going to do it. But we do
I
encourage
know
you
who
to
owns them.
You know who owns all of these songs?
Goatee Records owns all these songs.
Well, they don't own the later songs.
Well, okay, so I think if Matt Thiessen is listening, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when Relient K left Goatee Records, they started Mono versus Stereo, which was basically a sort of closet subsidiary of Goatee Records. So I think they were still signed to Goatee Records. They released all their vinyl through SML XL Vinyl, which is a subsidiary of Goatee Records. So I think holistically they still kind of belong to Goatee Records.
Oh, they're like one of the two bands still on Goatee. If you don't know, Goatee Records was the label in Christian music in the late '90s, early 2000s. It was if you weren't a fan of at least 5 bands or groups on Goatee, what was wrong with you?
Yeah.
You just they had them all.
Not only bands, but they had God, we were really fucking nerding out on this, but Tony Mac had started Goatee to support the Christian hip hop scene. So he had John Rubin, he had Grits,
Who'd
B.
you
Reith,
say?
I don't know.
Yes, he was. Be right.
B. Reith.
Be right.
B.
Took you long enough to
KJ,
get that.
I think KJ52 had not signed, but I think he had at some point been in talks with Goatee. But then they started signing just normal gospel and contemporary artists, and they kind of just fell in. I don't really follow anything they do anymore.
They are. Oh, they do have more than one current artist. Man, they have a lot. I don't know any of these. I don't know enough about current Christian music, but I'm looking on their Wikipedia page, so it could be wrong. Their first band was Out of Eden, that was ever signed to Goatee Records, if I'm correct on that. And they had who else? House of Heroes was on there at one time. That's wild. Jennifer Knapp was a big one. No to verbs or verbs.
The verbs. Yeah.
Right. L.A. Symphony.
I think Marzil was on there at some point.
Yeah. And so there's just a lot of really big names in the Christian space, and even some more recently like Jamie Grace and Stephanie Smith, who were not big in the early 90s, of course, but I think they were kind of getting kind of big. I don't know.
I mean, early 2000s. Yeah.
And of course, so that was the label, and Relient K was on that label, and that was the cool label. I don't know what the equivalent of that label would be. Like
now?
Yeah, like what label? If we said a label that to let everyone know.
But labels are so much more different now. They're not. You don't identify artists as much with their labels anymore. They're sort of subversive now, I think. Like, I don't know anyone that follows labels anymore. Like, I used to follow labels.
So the one I would think of, and it's kind of like it, is Fueled by Ramen, is what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Okay. That's one of the labels that I still sort of keep up with. Also, Fat Records, which is No Effects, Fat Mike. I still follow Tooth and Nail a little bit.
Oh.
But yeah, Goatee was as far as Christian music was the label to be on, even though their music hardly ever got played on contemporary Christian radio because it was too edgy. Right? Yeah. You didn't hear John Rubin. You wouldn't hear John Rubin on Way FM or K-Love or anything.
No, but it's wild because it was started by the quintessential Christian artist. Toby
Yeah.
Mac. Well, he wasn't
Yeah.
the only one who started it, but he was the biggest name that was on that. So anyway, that's a history of goatee.
Wrapped
So
into a Relient K discussion.
I think it's a good, solid first album. I think it has some really good, fun and serious songs, and kind of gets into their final track. Kind of talks about where the name Relient K comes from, with K Car, which is yes, their name is after a Reliant, spelled differently. So
For copyright purposes.
But
I feel like at this point the band has surpassed their namesake in popularity.
probably I don't know if anybody's like. I also think "Softer to Me" is the best song on this album. It is just so. It goes from being really like hard and edgy to being really like soft in the original version. A lot of music, a lot of like anger, and then just softens up, and it hits emotions so well going through different stages. I think it's a really good song, the original version and other versions. I just think it's an album that is what I call, and I told Adam that I'm going to do this. I'm going to rate these all by what cookie they are. He didn't think I was serious, as I can see right now. This is a sugar cookie, in my opinion. It's okay, but it's not my go-to choice, and it doesn't have a great taste. It just has it has a good taste. It's not, none of their albums is something I'm going to say is disgusting, but it's a sugar
Yeah,
cookie.
so I think every single one of their albums is good and has a certain charm to it in a way, but some I think are a little better than others, and we'll get to that later. But I think this album was a good template for them to go off of moving forward as they progressed as musicians and as songwriters, and as a band working as a collective. So I think this album was a great template, and it rolls. It kind of, I mean, if you listen to it and then you follow it straight into Anatomy, there's a solid progression there. So we can talk about Anatomy next.
Yes. So up next, coming out in 2001, 1 year later, was The Anatomy of the Tongue-in-Cheek, which I didn't know what tongue-in-cheek meant at the time. I was a very dumb kid. Yeah, let's just say it. And this one got really, truthfully, I felt like got into some really serious stuff. Those words are not enough. For the moments I feel faint. Failure to excommunicate. My way or the highway. Like, these are some serious themes. Like, to me, failure to excommunicate, which is literally says the word racism in it, which I thought was a word you weren't actually supposed to say in Christian music.
Right.
But and then of course there's a song called Maybe It's Maybelline, which seems like it's a stupid name of it, but it really is a good song. It has a good message.
Right, and then Down in Flames is more about what we talked about last time, judgmentalism, and sort of.
I think this only had one music video to it with Pressing On, which was their single from this. And it's a weird music video, not weird in the same way that My Girlfriend is a weird music video. Just all I remember is there was a fanny pack, and one of them, I think it was Matt Thiessen, takes out not lipstick, but like chapstick. I think it's chapstick, and he puts it on, and I just now got like if that's actual chapstick that's like looking ahead to the next album's opening single.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I have to look up this music video again and see if I can get it in anything other than like 260p or whatever it is, 12p.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think this album is a lot better. I don't think it was their peak, but I think it really was something they did well. And I rank this kind of as a one of those Kroger sugar cookies that has like the stuff on top of it. It's good. You pretend like you're like, no, I'm too old for that, but no, it's freaking tasty. And y'all all know what I'm talking about. Those Kroger sugar cookies are the best. They have that icing on top. It doesn't matter what the color is. You love those cookies. You know you do. You pretend like you don't, but you love those cookies because that icing makes the cookie great. You should not eat too many of them. You should not listen to this album over and over again because it'll eventually be like, okay, I can't keep doing this.
So aside from diabetes and Skittles and combos, what is your favorite album or song on the album?
So as I said, there are a lot of really great songs. Like I love Failure to Excommunicate, and I
Yeah.
love For the Moments I Feel Faint are great. But I have to go with the song that everybody knows from this album and everybody sang, and that was Sadie Hawkins Dance. Because if I would have said Sadie Hawkins Dance and I stop, everybody knows the next two words. All
I
have to
think
do
I
is
agree with you. I think City Hawkins Dance is my favorite on this one. I don't know. I'm torn between Pressing On and City Hawkins Dance and Down in Flames. I think maybe Down in Flames. I'm picking Down in Flames
okay.
because of the topic. We have to go into like their first monster album, which was Two Lefts.
So their third album coming out in 2003.
With
Two
three
Lefts
separate album covers.
Four separate.
It was four separate. Yes, four separate album covers. Blue, green, pink, and orange, I think, or yellow. One of the two.
Yellow. Which album cover did you have?
I think I have the pink, and I think I have it on vinyl, and the vinyl is orange.
Ooh,
But
yeah.
I think the vinyl cover was exclusive to the vinyl and different from all the CD releases.
Yeah. So to put it in perspective, if you're not looking up this first of all, the album name is Two Lefts Don't Make a Right, but Three Do, which is talking about a joke that I guess is not really around anymore, where they're like, two wrongs don't make a right, and they're like, two lefts don't make a right, but three do. And
right.
There was I can't remember, there was like a joke going around or something that I heard a few times. But anyway, all four covers, the four different covers of the CD, and yes, you could buy each of these CDs, maybe cassettes. I don't know if this ever came out on cassette. They're car crashes basically, or some kind of destruction. Where the one I had the blue one, which is a truck going into a phone pole, and they have another one where a rock lands on the back of a minivans, like 60s.
Like the VW bus, yes, or whatever.
And then they have a limo that has a tree that fell on top of it, and another car that has falling off the side of the road. And then
this is all artwork. This is all artwork that looks like it came out of Grand Theft Auto video game.
Yeah. And the vinyl one is just all four of those cars on the back of a truck taking them away.
Which is appropriate, because the vinyl came out so many years later.
Oh, yeah, and I forgot about this. They did come out with a fifth cover, or sixth, that is the official cover, I believe. After they did all that, they came out with a final cover, which is a greenish color that has all four of the cars in the junkyard.
Right.
So, yeah, there are like 6 different album covers to this. It was one of the few times that I was like, I should buy this album multiple times. I did not. I only bought it the one time because these were like $18 albums back in the day.
So my first introduction to this album was remember the WoW Christian Hits CDs or whatever? I think they still make them. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
they would
have like one of
the
them.
record labels would all get together and find a way to market their biggest. Anyway, so there was, I think Getting Into You was on one of those, and I think I had just gotten back from deployment, and I heard that, and then I went and got the because I always bought the WoWs. Like I collected the WoWs, and then Getting Into You was on there. It's one of the few like overtly Christian worship songs I think that they've ever like done, but it's not the best song on the album. The best song on the album was Silly Shoes, and then
you went with Silly Shoes,
and then after that I would say Overthinking. But not the overthinking that's on the album. The overthinking that comes later on the acoustic version on the Apathetic EP. That's my favorite version of the song off this album.
I love how twice you picked a song, but said not the version on this album, a different version that they did later.
But the versions on this, okay, so Chapstick was on one of the X CDs, which is like the Christian rock version of the WoW CDs. So Chapstick was good. Forward Motion is amazing. Everyone loves the Pink Tux to the Prom song. Gibberish is. I used to put Gibberish as like an interlude in like mix CDs that I would make. So I'd make like mix CDs and I'd have like a minute left, so I would just throw gibberish in.
I did not think anybody would actually. I mean, Silly Shoes is such a great one. I mean, Snakes. Sorry, that is the last line. Silly Shoes. I really love Jefferson Airplane, which is Silly Shoes is a song that's hidden track in the final track Jefferson Airplane, which is named after the band, I guess.
Hmm.
But I think my favorite one, and I love a lot of the songs on this album. I mean, Chapstick, Chaps Lips, and things like Chemistry, which we just talked about a moment ago, how it's like he's using the chapstick in the song or in the music video of the previous album.
The pressing on
But
video.
yeah, on the pressing on music video. That's a great song, but to me, I Am Understood is my favorite, though there's so many on here that are good. I Am Understood is a very religious song as well.
But you wouldn't know it unless you really read into the lyrics.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I was saying before about this band is that they have a way of inserting their faith into the quirkiness of their lyrics without you even noticing until you're actually paying attention.
Yeah. And I think this album, I think what really makes this album, to me, the Oreo of the albums. And what I mean by that is I could listen to this over and over and over again and it would taste good all the time. And it's probably not healthy for me to keep listening to this over and over and over again, but I'm going to, because who doesn't stop eating Oreos? You can't eat just one. You can't listen to this album just once. And part of that is this was the first album that came out, and we're going to date ourselves here, after we graduated high school. This was the first of their albums that was post high school world. And there are a lot of bands that their first album after I had graduated high school, for some reason, I really latched onto, because it was such a turbulent time in my life, I guess, because it was really trying to figure out what in the world I was doing. Like we talked about, like there were three of Adam, myself, and our third friend Donnie, which we talked about. We went three very different ways after high school. We were really good friends, and we went three very different ways, and kind of reconnected on and off over the next few years. And so it was weird for all three of us, what we were trying to figure out our life. And this album seemed to be like, what am I doing? And this album spoke to me very well.
Yeah.
And
there were two albums that came out in this time frame that I still latch onto. It's this and Blink-182's Untitled album that came out right around the same time. And those two albums, to this day, I still listen to.
I'm trying to think, like I've talked to a lot. My favorite band is actually another religious band, Jars of Clay. And I'm looking at what album they had that came out, which was Who We Are Instead, which has some of my favorite songs. And it was a very different type of album. And it was an Americana album. And now Americana is the type of music I listen to. And that was their influence. But with this album, Relient K's Two Lefts, it got, as it said, the previous album got into serious topics. This got into like a lot of self-reflection is what it felt like. Like, what am I as a person going to do? Not, I feel like Anatomy was all about what are we as a people doing? And Two Lefts is what am I as an individual doing?
Yeah, and to that point, I think that this album came out and we grew with the band. That's one thing about these bands is that as they progressed stylistically and musically, we also progressed, I think, as people. And I felt like that their evolution and my personal evolution were kind of level. So the things they were discussing in their music were things that I was going through as a human. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like Matt Thiessen is just a few years older than we are,
Yeah.
and and we all you kind of look up to people who are just a few years ahead of you because they're talking about something that happened to them like 1 or 2 years ago because they're not writing about their current life. When you
Right.
hear these albums, they were written like the 2-3 years ago and they're recorded last year and they came out this year. So by
Right.
the time it comes out, they have moved on to the next phase. But if you're a few years behind, you're just now hitting that age. And so
Right.
I think, especially when you're when you're in your late teens, early 20s, listening to bands that have who are who the bulk of the people are 3 to 5 years older than you is really who's going to connect with you a lot because there's so much development going on in your teens to 20s into up to like 30 that it's just all chaotic and you're picking it up as soon as they're able to get it to the on the radio or on YouTube now. You're hearing it and it's like this makes sense. And I
Hmm.
feel like that's what Relient K was. They were a few years ahead of us. So by the time we really heard it and were able to ingest it, it was exactly what we were going through.
Yeah, we were living it as it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we weren't living it as they were living it. We're living it as media takes 2 to 4 years to get to the ears of
Right.
the consumer. Okay.
So then they put out the Christmas album, Deck the Halls, which we're gonna skip over because it's not a, it's a side album. It's a Christmas album.
Yeah.
So we're gonna just bypass that and go straight to, mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm. Oh
which
wait, that's a
is,
different song.
mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm.
is their their biggest album.
And
Um,
also where I learned what a pre-gap track was, thanks to this
that
album.
was genius.
Yeah. And I
So
still
explain
cannot
that.
figure. So a pre-gap track is on a CD. It really only works on a CD. In fact, I
Yeah.
don't think you can't do it on a cassette unless you
Mm,
wind the cassette. You can only do it once on a cassette. But basically, you have the CD, and when the CD cuts on, and I don't know all the technical stuff behind this, it starts at a certain point on the physical CD. Well, you can actually put stuff in front of the start point. You just have to quote unquote rewind it to hear
right.
it. So you
Right.
basically have to have a CD player and press not the previous track, but press the rewind where you can go back like 10, 20, 30 seconds
Right.
and you go back and then you can hear the opening track. So there is a track 0 on this album that is just them humming, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. I
Yeah.
don't have any way to actually do this because most things that play CDs now do not have this function, so these tracks can't be heard anymore.
But so this is, that function is another indicator of their evolution and their quirkiness and their sort of willingness to sort of bend the rules to how, because
Mm.
that's outside of the norm. Like it's not a conventional thing to do. So it's just it was a cool, unique feature that you only got the experience from that, from owning a
Yeah.
physical copy of that, which is another reason why I like to own physical copies of things,
Yeah.
because there's different things about them.
Of course, if you get their 10th anniversary edition, you will hear that song as track
16.
16. Oh,
There you
because they
go.
added a different song in there. Okay, sorry. Um, so you can hear that song, but just not the pre-gap song. They weren't the first band, and they're not the last band to do a pre-gap track. It's only 17 seconds as well. Some bands have actually, I think, done up to 3 or 4 minutes. Not
Mm.
sure how. I don't know enough about CD technology to do it. Now, you could do it on a cassette too, technically. You could just, every time you ship out a cassette, that it's not rewound the whole way. So if someone just throws it into the cassette player and starts playing, it won't play that first song. But when they rewind it back, then it will. Or they can just look at the cassette and notice, like, wait, this isn't rewound. So you can
They
do
did
it
release they did release this album on cassette, but I don't know if how that track is worked into it.
It may
But
not even be
anyway,
on there. So,
I freaking love this album.
oh yeah,
This is just every song on this album is a 10 out of 10. But my favorite part of this album is when it transitions from Wish to Bury Us with a Hatchet into Let It All Out. There's like a seamless sort of piano transition that's just it's a freaking masterpiece. And that whole
yes.
those two that 9 minutes could easily be one full set of music all to itself. And they did this on this album, but they also did that on the Deck the Halls when they had the Silent Night and Away in a Major to I Celebrate the Day, and the exact same thing happens. They have this medley, and it transitions very seamlessly into I Celebrate the Day, and it all functions as one entire piece, and that's a beautiful thing. I really appreciate whenever bands do that because it adds to the experience, and the songs don't sound like distinct things all to themselves. They sound like parts of a larger piece. Blink-182 did that a lot, especially on Neighborhoods, and these guys did it here, and it worked out so well for the listener because there was no downtime and it was a seamless transition.
Yeah, I kind of associate when you see this happening, just you have a bunch of like individual songs and then 2 to 3 songs that are just kind of together.
Yeah.
It's like watching a TV series like watching The Simpsons or whatever, and they're all a bunch of individual ones, and then suddenly they have a to be continued. And then the next one is that continuation. And that's what it feels like because it's like, this is different.
Yeah.
They're taking 2 tracks to do one theme.
But the songs are amazing as individual tracks.
Yeah.
But then when you combine them and you listen to an album or you listen to this portion of the album through the way that it's intended to be listened to, you get a different experience than if you listen to it as a single piece all to itself. Which I think is why albums are amazing, and people should stop making mini albums and putting out singles and start releasing albums as individual pieces of art.
Yeah, I think there's something great about the album, and this is why it's always good when you listen to an album for the first time to hit play and not shuffle. Just listen to it straight through, because you see things like this that you wouldn't necessarily notice when you shuffle them. You don't notice the theme that's going on. Like, can you imagine someone saying, like, yeah, I listened to Pink Floyd's The Wall. I had it on shuffle. It made absolutely no sense. I was like, well, of course it made no sense. It's literally like... Did you hear that?
It's okay. I heard your dog. Yeah, it's fine.
She's annoyed. I don't know why. But it's literally like playing a movie and playing all the scenes in shuffle. I'm like, well, this movie made no sense.
Right.
And sometimes with you can listen to things out of order, but when you watch it in order, you can see there is something going on, even when it's not a thematic album.
I think this is when Relient really started to take shape and get a much stronger foothold on people, and they started to sort of, before they were a niche band, and they were, if you listen to Christian music, they were the cool band to listen to. But this album is what brought them outside of that box and gave them a wider audience. And I think this album, in some ways, hurt them a lot because for some people, this is where they stopped. You know what I mean?
For me, I consider this to be one of those Kroger sugar cookies again. I have a lot of Kroger sugar cookies with Relient K. I was going to have like 9 different, I think it's 9 albums we're talking about, 9 different types of cookies, but some of these albums are so similar to me, in how I feel about each of them. Like, oh, I feel the same way about Anatomy and a lot. because they have that same feel that they're good and they're tasty, and I'll eat a bunch of
Right.
it. And
Right.
this album obviously was their ones where they had their biggest hits, and they were on MTV. I think it was the only album where they had songs on MTV.
Yeah.
On top, what was it, TRL?
Yeah. And Be
There's a
My Escape was their big single, and it's still probably their most known for. But people who don't know Relient K know Be My Escape as their one-hit wonder single.
and then there's Who I Am, Hate to Have Been is their post big song single that some people remembered. Uh,
Right.
who didn't
And
know
people
Relient
really
K.
like the acoustic version of that one as well.
So to me, again, so many great songs, but my favorite is Life After Death and Taxes, which is, and if you, the full title, I think this is the actual title on it. That's what I'm looking at Wikipedia right now, so it could have errors on it. I'm not going to go digging out all my old CDs to make sure this is right, but Life After Death and Taxes, parentheses, Failure 2, which means it's the sequel to Failure to Excommunicate from Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek, which
Right.
talks about, which went on themes of like racism and excommunication and not being the in crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the line, never forget there's life after death and taxes.
And there's a dog. That's okay. The dog can stay in. It's fine.
Do you want me to re-say that?
No, it's fine. The dog is fine. So
Okay.
after a 3-year break, they came back with.
Say what year this came.
It was 2004, and then I think they had the Apathetic EP that came out afterwards. Was I'm not counting it as an album, but I will just say the Apathetic EP is a masterpiece unto itself.
Oh, yes.
That was where some B-sides. There were some B-sides to this album that came out. Apathetic Way to Be, The Thief, The Truth, and then there were some acoustic ones on here. I'm not even looking at the. But yeah, Apathetic EP was amazing, and it was their first, like commercially released EP. And it had the Narnia song, the "And Like a Lion, Always Winter," which they sent to Disney, I think, to put on the Narnia compilation soundtrack, but it didn't actually make the cut. Put it here instead, and then they put it on their Christmas remake album later on.
There's a literal song on here called Turkish Delight. Now, I love David Crowder Band, but come
Oh,
on.
dude. And that's probably David Crowder Band's worst song, to be honest. I love David Crowder Band too.
Yeah, so like,
Which
and if
we should do an episode on David Crowder Band later on because
yeah,
they're amazing.
so like, I love Waiting for the World to Fall, which is a Jars of Clay song. Obviously, I love Jars of Clay.
New World, Toby Mac.
I don't even remember that song anymore.
I do. Yeah.
But one of the things that, oh, this is the Inspired By. This is not the soundtrack, is it?
Well, that's the album they were gonna put this on. Was he Inspired By? It had Jars of Clay, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Toby Mac is on there, David Crowder Band's on there, and I can't remember who else is on there.
I'm thinking of one of the next Narnia album.
No, it was supposed to be for this one, I believe.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I'm sorry. I'm making a mistake. I was like, where is This Is Home? But that's the different Narnia album.
Right, Switchfoot wasn't on this one. It was on the next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were freaking nerding out over this music stuff, right?
So anyway, if you have not heard the song "In Like a Lion, Always Winter," it is one of the. It also gets put on their Christmas album.
Yeah.
One of them, they have a 2 or an EP, an album, or 2 EPs. Oh, there's a Chris Tomlin song on this Narnia album. Yeah.
In the prime of Chris Tomlin's career, yeah.
I bet it has 3 unique words. We should probably cut that. The 3 words, if you're curious, are "You're the one." He just says it over and over again. What's the difference between a Chris Tomlin work song and a club song? The beat.
All right, so after Apathetic, there was Five Score and 7 Years Ago, which
Yeah.
is the album title uh, refers to 5 albums into their career and 7 years into their career. It is obviously a
Yes.
reference to five score or four score and 7 years ago.
Is that right? No, it's four score. Is it four score and 7 years ago? Yeah. Sorry, I was like, it's four score and 8 years ago because it's 87 years. Uh, so I forgot what a four score was, and see, get it? It's score. It's not scores in years. It's scores in musical scores.
Right, which is their 5 albums. This is their fifth album coming in.
And
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 the
can we
intro
just
track is literally pleading the fifth. It's about the Fifth Amendment, but it's about the fifth album. Right? So you plead the fifth,
oh yeah.
not to testify in court, but it's their fifth album.
So I do want to point out real quick something we did not talk about. If you look at the cover, the CD cover of this album, or the vinyl cover, or whatever, the cover art of this album, um, they're literally all five. There are 5 members in the band at this time, and they make foreshadows as they cross over this like something on the ground, and they make in tallies a 5.
Right.
And it's a really cool thing that's so subtle and so
And no one catches it. No one even
yeah.
notices it.
But it was so great because you literally have one member of the band hiding behind another member of the band in order for it to work.
And they're sitting on
Anyway,
a crack in the concrete that makes the slash in the 4 marks.
So to put this to kind of put it in perspective, this was the last album I bought of theirs. So this is the last physical copy of theirs that I have. The most recent physical copy, I guess. No, it's not. That's a lie. I forgot. We'll get to that in a minute. But this is the last album I bought when it came out.
This is also their last release from Goatee, aside from Let It Snow Baby Let It Rain Dear, which was a Christmas album, a Christmas remake album, really. And then The Bird and the B-Sides, which had the Nashville Tennis EP, which I consider to be an album, but I'm probably alone in that thought.
So I was, young and did not have much money. So I had to pick between 5 Score and 7 Years Ago or The Boy versus the Cynic, which is a John Rubin album.
Yeah.
And I knew they were both going to be good, and I had to pick which album I could buy. I picked this one because of track 14, Deathbed. I knew about that track, and I just wanted it. Deathbed is not my favorite song on this album. It's probably my least favorite. It's just, it's an 11-minute song about a person talking about their entire life story as they're lying on their deathbed. It's a really cool thing. They're not the first to ever do something like this, but it's not the best song on the album.
But Deathbed is a masterpiece in its own right.
It's good, but it being so long is kind of overshadows it. If something about Relient K is they always had a last track up until I think this album that was like 10 to 12 minutes long, but it was really just a regular song and then a few minutes of silence and then a weird song like Skips and Combos or Silly Shoes, which is the greatest ending track they've ever had, I think. If you've not heard Silly Shoes, it's on another level. We talked about it earlier. So to me, this album is really, really good. This is my Thin Mint album. I love
Girl Scout Thin Mint.
Yes, we just got our Girl Scout Thin Mints. I ate some. I ate too many of them. It's one of those where I want to listen to and want to enjoy, and then I can put it down for a while. But when I am enjoying it, I'm going to enjoy all of it, and it's such a good cookie. There's my description for it. And what is my favorite song on this album is a tough one because there's so many good ones. But if I'm going to go with my favorite one, it's going to be a song that I'm looking on the track list and I'm like, it's not on here. Did I pick the wrong one? Because I already said, I love Failure to Excommunicate. I love Life After Death and Taxes. And then Devastation and Reform is like my favorite song on this album, and it's in the similar
Hmm.
vein of those two songs, which come at the end of their respective albums. And so I'm like looking at the last song, and I'm like, or the second or third to last song, and I'm like, I don't see it. Um, so Devastation and Reform, it's just, it's a good rock song, and I love it for that. Even though I have like connections and other ways to like must have done something right. Um, that has been a really important song in my life. Uh,
Hmm.
and let's face it, Crayons Can Melt on Us for All I Care is literally more words in the title than are actually in the song. That makes it a great masterpiece. So it's really hard. Uh, you have, I mean, I do like Faking My Own Suicide, but is this technically original to Relient K? Does this count?
So I was going to talk about that. Faking My Own Suicide. There was a demo version that was released on a compilation album called My Other Band, where Matt Thiessen and his side project, Matt Thiessen and the Earthquakes, had like three songs on it, or four. One was Poison Ivy, one was Faking My Own Suicide, one was, there were like two others. Um, but yeah, Faking My Own Suicide. The demo version of this song is really, really good. Um, and I think that it might be better than the album version of it. But my favorite on this album is Given Till There's Nothing Left. Yeah, I could listen to that song over and over again. Must Have Done Something Right is extremely cheesy, and
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not sure. But this album, there's no skips in this album. Like
yeah,
literally the same as every other album of theirs. There's no skips. You just do the whole thing
yeah.
all the way through.
The only one you could skip is Crayons Can Melt on Us for All I Care, but by the time you go to hit the skip button, the song's already over. It's
True.
literally a 12-second quote unquote song. It does have music in it. It's
And
nice
I'd be
piano.
I'd be remiss if I didn't call it the fact that for the iTunes version of this song, or this album rather, they covered Sleep John B by the Beach Boys, and it's probably my favorite cover of Sleep John B by the Beach Boys.
I've actually
So,
never heard their version of it, so
and also another sort of side thing about this album is that there's another song, another B side called Fallen Man, which appears on the Must Have Done Something Right single, which nobody's ever heard before except for the acoustic version on Bird and the B-sides. But if you go back and listen to the original version, it's freaking amazing. So if you haven't heard Fallen Man, go listen to Fallen Man.
oh
I don't even know where you can find it other than YouTube. But yeah.
yeah, I've obviously not. I've got the acoustic version, right? The Birds and the B-sides version.
Yeah, but the original version I think is way better than the acoustic version. So, um, and then let's talk about the Bird and the B-sides and
Oh,
the Nashville Twist.
yeah, I was gonna say one real quick because I'm not
Yeah.
taking that route that you did. But if we're counting versions that don't appear on this album, Up and Up Acoustic is maybe one of my favorite songs of theirs. Just I
Yeah,
think it's beautiful. And that actually appears on,
the Bird and the B-sides.
yes. Perfect. So the birds, the bird and the B-sides came out 1 year later in 2008. And I
And it was our
bought,
last goatee release.
yes, and I bought this album 5 years later at a Reliant K concert where
Really?
they were doing the 10th anniversary, or is it 6 years later? Might have been 6 years later. It was 6 years later when they did the 10th anniversary of the. Sorry, every time I say it, I have to go.
Right. It's a hard album name to say. But like,
Yes, it
okay,
is.
so that was the one that you and I went to together, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
we did not talk about this. Even as big of Reliant K fans as we are, uh, it's not like we've seen them a lot of times in concert.
I've only seen them once,
I've
and I
only
hate
seen them
it.
twice.
So I spent a lot of time overseas where they never really toured overseas, so I didn't really get a chance to see them very often. I've seen Switchfoot uh, three times, I think, but I've only seen Relient K once.
So yeah, we went to the 10th anniversary tour, and it's one
Yeah,
of my favorite. It's like on my top 10 favorite concerts of all time that I've been to. It was just so good. I hated the venue, and I loved the them because I hate where they played it, and I was like, oh, why do they have to play it at that particular venue, which I'm not gonna name, uh, because well, it's a
I
pretty
don't remember the
famous.
name of the venue.
Thank goodness, because you'd be like, oh, you mean blah, blah, blah? Like, don't say that. People actually like that place. I don't. It was so hot.
We saw Owl City there too, right?
Yes, we did.
We saw Owl City, and then I went and saw Amber Lynn there afterwards. So I've been there 3 times. But anyway, so I'm gonna make a case for this real quick. The Nashville Tennis EP is a
Is that a
Relient K
pun?
album. Yes, the Nashville Tennessee P because it's Tennessee. They made it, and they record. By this time, they were all living in Tennessee, so but it's also a tennis because anyway. So
They were
at this
living in
point, they
Tennessee. That's
stopped.
funny.
Yeah. So this was kind of the end of their goatee run, I think, and this is their last goatee album. But the first 13 songs on the Burden B-sides is collectively known as the Nashville, Tennessee EP. It is all original recordings where they allowed or they experimented with other members of the band writing and recording vocals. So it's an extremely unique project. And there's like a reggae. Oh, which one is it? No Reaction. There's like a reggae-esque song on this one called No Reaction, which is really interesting and cool. And then there's The Last, the Lost, the Least, which doesn't even sound like a Relient K song. It's good, but it doesn't sound like a Relient K song.
I was like, it almost sounds like House of Heroes to me.
Yeah, right? So, yeah, the influence is there. Um, but yeah, every song on this has like a really unique sort of twist to it, and a lot of them are shorter. Some of them are less than 2 minutes long. No Reaction is only 1 minute long, and then Be Your Man was like a little quirky sort of ending to it, and transitions into the rest of the CD, which is basically a bunch of acoustic and leftover B-sides from various projects. My favorite song on this album is There Was No Thief.
If you want a all-inclusive Reliant K album that has a bunch of different stuff, this is the album to get, I think. If you want to get like, I need a good sampling, this is it. It's worth it. You usually can get it really cheap. And some of this stuff is demos or different sounding, but it has just overall, when you put the two together, the Burden the B-sides, and the Nashville, Tennessee EP, which is normally just all called the Burden the B-side, you get a really good, 26 songs that I think I spent $10 on when I bought it. But when you buy songs at a concert, when you buy albums at the concert, they're always cheaper, of course, than getting them anywhere else. And you get physical copies.
Yeah.
And you can get them signed sometimes, which is really cool.
So they did press the Nashville Tennis EP as its own thing on vinyl, which is why for that reason, well, other than what I said before, for that reason, I consider this to be its own independent work. It just happened to be wrapped in with a bunch of bonus tracks, effectively.
Yeah.
But the bonus tracks are worth mentioning because they had several EPs in their early part of their career, like the Vinyl Countdown, which was a 7-inch that they released. I think it was just for touring purposes only, but it was a 7-inch vinyl when nobody was listening to vinyl except for them. And the Vinyl Countdown is a song about their love for vinyl records. And then there was 2 versions of Five Iron Frenzy is Either Dead or Dying, and that was a tribute to Five Iron Frenzy, which ironically is a band that is still playing, even though Relient K is either dead or dying at this point.
Kind of the, well, didn't see that coming.
So anyway, and another little tidbit about this album is that they had like a little scavenger hunt thing before it came out, where they somehow placed bonus tracks in places on their website or in conjunction with their website to where you could find them and go download them or something. And one of those bonus tracks was Between You and Me, which was a DC Talk cover that originally appeared on the Freaked compilation album, which was a bunch of goatee artists remaking DC Talk's Jesus Freak album. And that cover of Between You and Me is better than DC Talk's original version.
I have not heard any of the scavenger hunt stuff. Can you even still get this?
I have no idea. I think you can still get Between You and Me, I think, on Spotify.
So when I listen to this album, this is to me a chocolate chip cookie. It is good. It is tasty. It is what you expect and what you want. I love this album. I love both the Nashville, Tennessee EP and the Birds and the B-sides, but we're not talking about the Bird and the B-sides. But I will just say I love the stenographer on the Bird and the B-sides because it is Matt Thiessen's amazing ability to put a pun in a song and not make it cheesy. And that song, I think, shows it. He does it throughout his entire career. And a lot of these songs, and you see they have like really punny album names and really punny song names, but there's a lot of puns that go throughout a bunch of what he's written, and it flows well. It doesn't sound like it's out of place, and that song does it. It has it's like a 2-minute song, and I've counted like 12 puns in it that just kind of flow together, or something. Maybe not 12. I'm guessing it was a lot. It was just like one after another. So that's just my little side note, and you can find it online if you want to. It says demo, but did they ever put this out on somewhere else?
I don't think so. I think that was just the demo version. I think that the demo was released on something else. Maybe like, I think it may have been on one of their early EPs. I'd have to look, to be honest.
Yeah. But if we go to the Nashville, Tennessee EP, I love just like a chocolate chip cookie all the way throughout. It has a very good, consistent taste. I think maybe chocolate chip cookie with some walnuts in it, where you get like no reaction, and you're like, "This is different," but I'm feeling it, and then before you know, it's gone. But my favorite song on here is "At Least We Made It This Far." But as I said, you can go through this whole album, and every time I go through it, until they get to like Beaming, which is just weird.
Yeah.
It's about Beam Me Up, Scotty, which kind of takes you out of the moment for a moment, but it's funny. But it's just like a bunch of just really good songs. But At Least We Made It This Far was it's slower. Like most of these songs aren't slow; they're more upbeat. But that one's slower, and it just. I think the whole album is just really good, and it's 13 songs, previously unreleased, right? Except for There Was No Thief to an extent. So that is a full album length worth of new material. Like they have albums that have fewer tracks than that.
Your dog is doing stuff. So Forget Not Slow Down came after Burden of B-Sides, and it was it was the first non-goatee release on Mono versus Stereo. Yeah, so this album is, I have to say, it's my favorite album by Relient K, mainly for 3 reasons. One is I Don't Need a Soul, 2 is Therapy, and 3 is the bonus track Terminals, which had production from Adam Young of Owl City on it.
Owl City?
Are you familiar with Owl City?
He did that Hello Seattle song.
The Fireflies guy. But Therapy is, aside from something I need to do more often, probably one of my favorite songs from any band ever. It's a great song.
It's hard to describe why these songs we like them so much sometimes, because it's not just the lyrics, it's not just the music, it's when we heard it the first time.
Yeah. I started listening to this album about a year after it came out. I was late to it because when it came out, I was in Iraq and I didn't have access to good internet or music or anything. But when I came back from deployment and I started college, I picked up this album at Hastings because I knew that it came out, so I wanted to get it. And I must have listened to this thing every day the entire first year I was in college. And Therapy is definitely my favorite song on this album. Well, I don't know. I go back and forth between I Don't Need a Soul and Therapy. And then whenever you go to Amazon, you find the bonus track, Terminals. which is also amazing. I want to throw in SMLXL Vinyl put out like a ton of 7 inches that had rare Relient K bonus tracks, and this one was coupled with I think Look On Up. Are you familiar with Look On Up?
I am not actually.
Okay, you need you need to listen to Look On Up. Also another one of my favorite Relient K songs. But so I think at this point in Relient K's career, their more mature side really started to flourish, and they I don't think they lost their wittiness, but their lyricism is incredible. But their you're not gonna find mood rings on an album like this. You're not gonna find
Yeah.
uh, Pressing On or Pink Tux to the Prom on an album like this. This I don't know, and it like I said before, it like evolved with me.
I see like on again Wikipedia, it has a pre-gap out song.
Yeah, they did the same thing with this one.
Okay, I never even heard, I didn't even know about this one. Uh, so this album is one that I don't know that well. When we get into the last 3 albums, so for all those who are like, how much longer can they go on this? Well, you're whatever's playing your podcast should say the number of minutes left in this particular podcast, and it's more than it should be, I bet. So,
We're just taking some time here just to geek out about one of our favorite bands. You
and,
skip this one if you don't want to deal with it.
and like any good sermon, this is going to have a point in the end.
Yep.
So, not very long, and there's going to be a really long altar call, and it's going to get quite weird because not enough people are going to come up the first time. So, we're going to have to do a second altar call because we have to hit the quota, the
Right.
salvation quota. Got to get a baptism in next Sunday night.
So when did you first hear this album? It was after it came out, right?
Yes. So, all the way through, it was this past week.
Oh,
Yeah, like these
didn't
last.
I bought this album for you though, right?
No.
I bought The Boy versus the Cynic for you.
Yes. At Hastings, I
Yeah,
believe.
at Hastings. Because I
Let's
was like, I'm so tired of you not listening to The Boy versus the Cynic. You need to go listen to this album.
Yes, and if we want to mention Toys R Us and Circuit City, if we want to continue mentioning places that no longer exist,
Yeah,
uh,
or Borders.
FYE. Uh,
Tower Records.
we're just going through all of the places we used to get music that you can no longer get music because there are no more
They no
them.
longer exist.
And yes, so anyway, I've heard several of the songs from this. I heard I Don't Need a Soul, Therapy beforehand, and I have heard a few bits and pieces of this album over the past few years at least, but not all of it. The big thing that I noticed was it felt like this album was obviously like when you listen to the first section, the first of their their first 5 albums, or you listen to their first 4 albums, and then their middle 2, 5 score, and then into Forget and Not Slow Down. You can kind of see this is the middle part of their story. Like the
Yeah.
first 4 albums are very much a very more fun punk. This is more of a rock pop, and it seems like then they soften up in their last 2 albums even more so.
Yeah.
This one I put also as a chocolate chip cookie. As I said, I didn't come up with 9 different types of cookies because I don't eat 9 different types of cookies. You know what I forgot? This one actually, I'm going to say this one's a peanut butter cookie. It's
Yeah.
really tasty, but it's not one I get that often because I don't think about it. So yes, a very tasty cookie, but who thinks to get a peanut butter cookie when the chocolate chip cookie's right there? So yeah, odds are I'd probably listen to the Nashville, Tennessee EP. No, the Nashville, Tennessee EP over this album, just because it's just one I know better. But this is still very good. Therapy is also my favorite song on here, and I will say, like it's 15 tracks if we don't count the bonus tracks or the pre-gap tracks. And it does not feel like 15 tracks because they do that connecting songs. And of course, there are a lot of intros and outros. But like there's like Sahara goes into Oasis, goes into Savannah, goes into Baby. And they seem to all fit as one song. Even though Oasis and Baby, I think, are the intro and outro to Savannah. But when you think of a Savannah, it connects to a Sahara. Right. Savannah is a place, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, these are connected. Right. And so you see this connection between the songs as well that aren't necessarily supposed to be connected as much. I don't know if they are, but I just felt like that whole Sahara to Baby, which is 4 tracks, I wouldn't necessarily say 4 songs, but it feels like one big long connection, like a nice medley.
Right. Yeah.
And it really works. Well, I think it's not like a bunch of just like wasted space, which you get a lot in albums. One of the things I will say about Relient K is most albums you listen to, the first half is really good, and the second half you're like, what the heck is going on here? Like, these are just some filler songs. Yeah. And I've never felt that way about Relient K. I've always thought that they start off strong and they get stronger. Like, I feel like their latter half is really good. And I do love Savannah. It's a very different type of song. It's not their typical slow song, and it's not an upbeat song, but I just like the melody of it. I just think it's really good. But Therapy is my favorite.
My only criticism of this album, which isn't really a criticism, but it's like, I don't like listening to songs from this album outside of this album because, like before with I feel like the entire album is an experience unto itself, and to remove something out and have it by its like in a playlist or something, it feels incomplete without the rest of the, out of context or whatever.
Yeah, I want to bring this back to Pink Floyd again, which just seems so weird because Pink Floyd did nothing but concept albums. But it's really weird when you hear songs from like Dark Side of the Moon on the radio, and you're like, but it's only one part of the experience. And it's not to the same extent. I don't think that Relient K did it, but there was some like, I could see like if you just picked out a random song, it's like, okay. But I could listen to Therapy all the time.
Yeah. Therapy's amazing. I can't say that. Like I said, it's probably I gotta say, Therapy is probably one of my favorite songs, period, in existence from any band. Worth mentioning is the Relient K is for Karaoke, K is for Karaoke album, which is a cover album, which also has a track called Baby, but it's a cover of Justin Bieber's Baby as opposed to the small little interlude on this album, Baby. So differentiating between those two on like Spotify or something is extremely important because you're getting 2 different experiences. One is like a 46-second clip of, part of the album, and the other is a cover of Justin Bieber's Baby. So it's a little bit disappointing either way. So but anyway, proceeding into the next album, it was a completely different experience from what previous albums from Relient K were. And this was, I dare say, their pop album.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
People did not like this when it came out. People thought that they had just completely fallen off, that this was out of left field. I personally really enjoy this album. Before the album came out, That's My Jam with Owl City came out on like YouTube. Is this Relient K? This isn't Relient K. This is Owl City featuring Matt Thiessen. But no, I kind of agree. Like, this album is a completely different sort of experience, but at the same time, it's not an unenjoyable experience. And as a band and as a piece of art, I think that you have creative license to evolve to some extent. I know when you approach an artist's album where you've had a preconceived notion of what it should sound like, established over the course of 6 or 7 albums prior to that, you're coming to this with the expectation it's going to sound something similar. And when it's completely out of left field like this, it throws people off. The reaction was overwhelmingly negative from what I saw. But I liked it, and you can't complain.
What's your favorite song?
The title track, "Collapsible Lung."
I thought you were gonna say it was "Can't Complain."
No, but I did throw that in there to see if you'd catch it.
I thought that it was, yeah. Are you saying this wasn't a disaster?
This wasn't a complete disaster.
No,
No,
no.
I did
Don't
feel a
blink.
little bit. I did feel a little bit like a Lost Boy when I was listening to it, though.
I mean, I'm just gonna throw this out here, and I hope it doesn't boomerang back on me.
Sure.
uh, I was like singing Gloria. Oh, okay. This is why I should not do this at like midnight.
But at this point, I think they had long evolved past the Christian label, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I think there's some things that I think I'm trying to remember what it is, if it's on Air for Free or not, which is the next album that I was thinking. And on this one, it's like there's still some very Christian stuff here that's weird, that I thought they were no longer doing that type of thing. And let's just point out, like, something I'm looking at, the writers. Like, here's the thing about Relient K, if you don't know, if you want to look at the writers, there's one. On almost every song they've ever done, there is one writer. If you look on this album, like 20 different
Yeah,
people that have helped write. It's not just the main one, sometimes two with Matt Hoops. Um,
yeah,
there are a lot of people that wrote on this album, like you would expect from a pop album. Like when you hear a singer-songwriter, they are the only writer, usually how it is. But when you have a pop song, there's like 20 writers, it seems like.
yeah. And
Because it's just different styles.
at this
Sorry,
point,
go ahead.
Matt Thiessen had already like co-wrote like half an Owl City album, and he'd written for Kelly Clarkson, and like a few other major mainstream pop artists. Like at this point, Matt Thiessen was no longer Christian singer of Relient K. Matt Thiessen was like can do no wrong songwriter who collaborates with basically like everyone, right? So um, this was like a natural evolution. I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely very different. I put this as a uh, my oatmeal raisin cookie.
What's your
So
favorite song on this album?
but I have to just explain what I mean by oatmeal raisin cookie.
Oh,
It I
pardon
think
me.
I'm going into it thinking it's going to be a chocolate chip cookie. It is not a chocolate chip cookie, but as soon as I realize what it is, I actually like oatmeal raisin cookies. I like this album. Believe it or not. I think my favorite song, it's really hard for me to say. I did like PTL. PTL reminds me of Michael Jackson. Isn't that the name of a Michael Jackson song?
No, his is
Pretty Young Thing, isn't it?
yeah, PYT, yeah.
Yeah. So it reminded me of that, and that's
It's
just
certainly an
weird.
allusion to it though.
Yeah, that's weird on so many different levels that I'm not going to get into today. I think I forgot which song. It was one of them that just was so catchy, and I literally forgot its name. But it was catchy, and I think it was. It might have been "If I Could Take You Home," and it's just such a pop song, and it's so repetitive, but I liked it, and I hate that I liked it, and I know this album is not. It doesn't feel very deep in the lyrics, but it
Yeah.
feels fun, and I think when you have a bunch of different writers, that might be one of the side effects. Is it's hard to get into serious stuff because you have too many people trying to come at it, and they all put their own idea. It just makes it very difficult to have
Yeah.
have a really good clear message, and so that's why a lot of pop songs probably sound very
Watered
tame.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just because it's the nature of how pop songs are written, and it sucks in
Well,
some ways, but
so the two songs on here that are Matt Thiessen and Matt Hoops uh, are "Don't Blink," which sounds like a very Reliant K song and a good opener, and "Collapsible
Don't Blink.
Lung," which is the closing song. So, what are your thoughts on "Air for Free"?
So Air for Free is a stale sugar cookie for me. Uh, it has some good parts, but most of it is not great. I do not like Air for Free. I'm just going to be honest here. I thought
Okay.
it has a lot of songs. Interesting enough, like for a band that has some really long names, For the Moments I Feel Faint, I So Hate Consequences, there's not a single song on here except for the title track that is more than 2 words long in title. It's a lot of single word titles, which is weird. It just doesn't feel Relient K to me. I don't know what.
Mhm.
That's just a random thing, but
I
I
mean,
love Mountaintop. Sorry, go ahead.
no, it's an observation.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah, my favorite song on here is Mountaintop. Uh, I just think it's really good. The music video is really fun. This is a very forgettable album to me. I was not super impressed. I hate to say that, but I listened to it and I was like, I wanted to really like this. I
yeah.
love it's everything you need. It's what you expect. But they came back from Collapsible Lung, and I want to say I liked it, but I felt like what happened with Collapsible Lung could not be changed. This was Collapsible Lung was the direction they were going, and this was just a continuation, maybe a little pullback. And I know it's much more liked than Collapsible Lung, but I'm just like, meh, it's not Reliant K as I thought. Forget Not Slow Down is.
So worth noting, they did the pre-gap technique on the CD release of this as well, where they had just a small little piano intro. I've listened to this entire album all the way through several times, and the songs that I remember on this album that I really enjoy are Bummin', which is like the only true Reliant K song on this album that I can think of. Local Construction, Mississippotamus, and then skip a few tracks because it's filler, I think. God, um, and Flower. Mountaintop is good, and all these songs are listenable. Nothing on here is atrocious and unlistenable, but the album as a whole just doesn't speak to me in the way that every other Reliant K album has in some way. And but my favorite song on here is either God or Flower. I'm torn, but I'm gonna say God. Um, but it's weird to have God on here after a secularization of Reliant K, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was like an attempt to uh, re-engage with the Christian market or whatever, but I don't really know how. This is probably the one Reliant K album that I'm not just like blown away by.
Yeah,
And
it's good. It's just not. It feels like when I was talking earlier that Reliant K doesn't have like the second half in most of their albums. The second half that's really terrible, like a lot
yeah,
of bands do, where you listen to the first half and nobody ever listens to the. I guess it'd be the side B if you listen to it on vinyl or cassette. Uh,
yeah,
Nobody would ever touch that side. This is the album of their side B.
this is their side B album.
Yeah,
Like
they're good
everything
songs.
else is side A, and this
Yeah,
is side B.
this entirely is side B.
Yeah,
Collapsible Lung has some side B songs on it, yes, but this entire album is side B. And you're like, oh,
but
there's 1 or 2 good songs,
but
really good songs, but
building up to this album, they released "Look On Up," which isn't on this album because it's better than every song on this album. If you haven't heard "Look On Up,"
I have
it's
not.
their best non-album single, I think. So that's your homework for tonight. Um, so yeah, I don't think this is. I would say this is probably their worst album, and that's actually a really big compliment because this album is fantastic as an album, but not as a Relient K album. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like
Yes.
I think that if you put this album side by side with any other release that of 2016 when this album came out, I think that it is far better than almost anything else that came out that year. But if you put it next to every other Relient K album, it's not holding water at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, I know like I got into Reliant K and their second album was like my big favorite album. And this is their 8th album or 9th album, depending on how you want to count. if we want to count Nashville, Tennessee EP, or if we want to count the Christmas album. But bands evolve, they grow up, bands soften up. One of the things I've always said, like Matchbox 20, I loved Matchbox 20 as a kid. They were edgy and they were angsty, and I grew up and I was no longer edgy and angsty, and neither were they, because they started having families and they were really rich and having kids, and life was going much better for them. It's hard to be angsty when you're sitting in your millions of dollars of cash, or however much. I don't actually know if any of them are millionaires, because the music industry, artists don't generally get rich off of.
Right.
But like, it's hard to care about the angstiness, and it's hard to go back to that when you don't feel it anymore. And Relient K is definitely a band where the type of music they made big in Christianity, in Christian music scene, it's just not a thing anymore anywhere. Like, nobody's going to be playing punk Christian songs in 2020 and be like, have number one hits. That's not what anybody wants anymore. So,
well, and I think at this point, I think after Forget and Not Slow Down, Relient K as a band sort of dissolved. Well, yeah. Well, they dissolved from attempting to be a large Christian band and sort of settled into making music that they felt was right for the time that they were in, and maybe stagnated a little bit, but not in a negative way, just in a way that they allowed themselves the freedom to create the art they wanted to create, as opposed to the art that everyone else wanted them to create. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think this is the final product of that. And it's worth noting that after that, if you count Matt Thiessen and the Earthquakes, the Wind Up Bird album that came out after this is even a further departure from Relient K proper. So if you listen to that, that's like the next step in this evolution, but it's also a really, really good album, and I enjoy that. I have that on vinyl. So yeah, do you want to rank? Do you want to give your rankings for your Relient K albums, worst to best? Go worst to best.
I've talked a lot. Talked a lot, and I may have changed some of the rankings in the middle of this talk, and I may have accidentally said the wrong cookies on a few of these, so I apologize for that.
Well, it's important. It's important to know your cookies.
Yes. Okay. So worst to best. So at the bottom, I don't know if you can really hear that, but I'm gonna put Air for Free at the bottom. And then there's like a gap. And here's the thing I have to say is, like, a lot of these albums are really hard for me to put, because I go Air for Free and I'm like, I don't like that album. And the rest of them, I mean, I like, it's okay, but the rest of them I really like, but you have to put them in an order. So it goes for Air for Free, then Relient K, their debut album, then then Collapsible Lung, then I go to that's the one tier. Then I go up a tier, and I have the Nashville, Tennessee EP, Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek, and Forget and Not Slow Down. So that's another tier. So this is this third tier up. And then my top tier, my top two albums are 5 Score and 7 Years Ago, and then my favorite album, Two Lefts Don't Make a Right, but 3 Do.
My worst to best for Relient K, if there is such a thing: Air for Free, Relient K, Anatomy of the Tongue in Cheek, Collapsible Lung, Nashville, Tennessee EP, Two Lefts, 5 Score, and Forget and Not Slow Down.
I find it interesting that our, for the most part, we're very similar. Obviously, we're not going to be the same, but a lot of similarities.
There may be some objectivity to it. I think there's some universally liked things about a lot of these albums, and there are some universally disliked things about a lot of these albums. And
so we got to do it. Best song.
The best Relient K song?
Yes. of all time.
Overall,
It doesn't even have to be on one of these albums. It's just the best overall Relient K song. And
are we
why is it
including
Skittles and combos?
covers?
I want original, truthfully, because I mean, I wanted ones that they wrote and they recorded and they, you know. But if you want to tell me your favorite cover, you can.
I'm gonna say Look On Up. Well, yeah, I'm gonna say Look On Up.
Haven't not heard it, but I do have it queued up on YouTube to listen to after this. I can't say whether or not I agree with you, but it's clearly Charles in Charge. No, which is also a cover technically.
Right, yeah, technically, I guess.
Shoot, can't use it. It's K Car. It's definitely K Car now. No, truthfully, it's for me, it's Life After Death and Taxes. I'll never
I
not
would
like that
say
song.
I had to have a top three because I would say Look On Up, Therapy, and I Don't Need a Soul.
So if I did my top three, I'm just gonna go 1, 2, 3. Number 1 is Life After Death and Taxes. I know I said I Am Understood is my favorite song on Two Lefts, but I'm going to say Jefferson Airplane is my number 2 song, just because why not? Actually, it's probably going to be, I don't know. I can't do the top 3. Getting Into You. I really love Getting Into You. There's so
Yeah,
many good songs. It's hard to do. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm sorry. Sorry, I can't do
it's
it.
okay.
The only thing worse than beating a dead horse is riding one. Wait, no. No. What? Wait, how's that song go? No, the only thing worse than beating a dead horse is being one. That's the name of that song, isn't it?
All right, well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we dismiss for today?
Now, I mean, the only thing I really wanted to say is like when we talked about this as being a topic, is I wanted to talk about, and we're going to continue this, the idea of like meaning is what you make it. And we live in a society that is so obsessed. I feel like I'm about to become a politician, but the way I'm doing my hands, either I'm being a politician or I'm one of those ground control traffic people for
Right, but no one can see
planes.
your hands, so
Exactly. That's why this podcast works so well. We live, I think we as people tend to think we only need to care about that which is important, forgetting that we decide what's important. And for like, we're always so caught up in what the serious thing is and what has to be done and what we need to really care about politics or religion or money or this or that. And these are serious topics that we have to do. And it's one of the things I had in school where they're like, we have to be everywhere and we have to take care of all these people. And we have to worry about all these different things. And I'm always like, that's just overwhelming. And sometimes what's important is the simple things, like listing out your favorite Relient K albums. I literally put more research into this than I've put into papers that I had to write. I've spent so much time listening to Relient K albums over the past week.
this
And a
is
half or something.
this is an important band because for me because they're like I said before, I've evolved from the time that I was what 17, 16, 17 to now, and so is this band, and I feel like I've evolved with them, and every time a new experience in my life has come up, there's been a new Relient K album that talks about something that I'm going through. So it it's yeah, this is one of those bands that uh, I wish would continue to make music and evolve, even though I know it's going to sound, you're not going to get another or another anatomy, but you might get an evolution from Air for Free.
Sure. But yeah, this is a lot of fun, and it brought me back down like memory lane. We do want to talk in the future uh, about making meaning. Meaning is what you make it. That's something you hear a lot, and I think that's so important that we ascribe meaning to things, and we say some things are more important than others, but because we want them to be. And I know people who say like uh, medical research is so much more important than video games.
Yeah.
And okay, in one sense, yes, but in another sense, no. And
Yeah.
I don't really want to get into it here. Why? Because I do want to save that for another time. But in the same way, like Relient K has a lot of deep meaning, and who knows what some of these songs have meant to people over the years. I know they've meant a lot to me. And this isn't
Yeah.
even my top 5 favorite bands of all time, or top
Yeah.
3. They might be in my top 5. I haven't really counted my top 5 favorite bands. But yeah, and they've meant so much to me, and it was really cool to go back and listen to old songs and remember and not speed up. Uh, that was a terrible pun. You just looked at me like for a moment, like, did you just do what I think you just did? Like, there was this moment of like, I'm going to pretend like I didn't understand this pun because I don't want to.
Yeah.
So
I got it.
yeah, I could see you got it. That was the problem. You're like, I really got this pun. I'm going to pretend
Yeah.
like I didn't hear that, and I'm just going to just ignore it. But I don't think that's my big thing, and of course, definitely silly shoes.
Yeah.
Most people don't. Most people who are Relient K fans, well, not most people, but a lot of Relient K fans out there are like, I have no clue what you're talking about when you say silly shoes, because it's not titled that. That's just the name that's been given to it. I don't even know if that's officially its name, but
Right.
that's what it's collectively been called. As this
Yeah.
hit track on, I forgot which album. We just talked about it earlier, but
So why should anyone care about Relient K or any of our favorite bands or anything at all? You shouldn't. You should care about the bands that you care about. You should care about the things that you care about. This is just our opportunity and our right as owners of, or as uh, makers or speakers on this little podcast we got, to just sort of take a minute and just sort of give a nod to something that we've appreciated for. I mean, they've given us uh, music for over 20 years, so we're acknowledging that and appreciating it, and just taking 2.5 hours out of our life to talk about it.
oh golly, for 2.5 hours, we gotta edit this down a lot.
We will, don't worry.
uh,
Um,
wow.
so yeah, if you've stuck with us throughout this podcast, you must either be in the band Relient K or a really big fan.
Nobody's in the band Relient K anymore. uh, but
Fine.
if you stuck with us throughout this podcast, welcome to a new week. Because that's about
Next
how
week
long
we
we've been
will. Next week
talking.
we will dive into a little more serious, not serious, but we'll talk about conspiracy theories as we promised before, and we'll do some research for that topic. Um, Part of the reason we didn't do that this week is because A, we want to talk about this band, and B, because of the stuff happening in Nashville, we didn't have a lot of time to really do a whole lot of research into the topics we needed to. So this is kind of a little bit of a sidetrack for us, but we'll get
Yeah.
back on. And I think we're at 100 listeners for our last 2 podcasts right now.
What's wrong with y'all?
So I don't know what they're doing. I don't know who these people are, but
You're listening to two
wait,
random people who just happen to be 20-year plus friends talk about
yeah,
random things. Like we literally, I think, should just start taking dice and throwing them, or Scrabble pieces and throwing them, and we could find it Ouija board style or something.
I'll tell you what, if we have 100 listeners within our first 3 episodes of this podcast, we must have done something right.
Thank you for listening. It has been fun to talk again today. Next time we will be getting into more topics. Conspiracy theories is coming up. Think about what your favorite conspiracy theories are. We're going to get into some of ours. And I will say, life is not written in ink. Oh, no, 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 no. We make mistakes, we evolve, we change, we erase, and we rewrite. For that reason, life is written in pencil. And go out there and have some good devastation and reform. Get yourself some therapy. Uh, Find the mountaintop And be softer to me. Life after death and taxes. And enjoy wearing your silly shoes.
And coronavirus was created in a lab in China.